So, how did Robert Downey Jr. go from broke and homeless into one of the biggest movie stars in the world? Now, Robert is a kid when this story starts, and he's around 5 years old, living mostly in New York. And his dad is in the movie industry making small, independent movies. And instead of getting a babysitter, his dad will just put him in his movies. And one day in 1971, something pretty messed up happens that's going to change his life forever. His dad gives him a little Zaza at 6 years old. And since his father is an addict himself, mostly Coca-Cola, he always has drugs and alcohol around. And over the years, he starts giving them to Robert regularly. And so Robert has been doing drugs for literally as long as he can remember being alive. And by the 80s, he's a teenager going into his early 20s. He's now addicted to Coca-Cola himself, but despite all that, he's grown up to be very talented at acting and performing. And he starts acting in movies that aren't his dad's. And he becomes an SNL cast member for about a year. He's in a bunch of stuff. But one day in 1992, he plays Charlie Chaplin in the Charlie Chaplin biopic. And suddenly, boom, Robert's career explodes. And he even gets nominated for an Oscar. And he becomes this big celebrity now. And it looks like nothing can bring him down until the mid-90s when Robert's around 30 years old. He screws it all up because alongside the drugs he's already addicted to, he starts using heroin and crack, and his addiction spirals out of control. And then in 1996, he's driving around Los Angeles super high and police pull him over. And when they approach his car and open the car door, they see Robert inside naked and hallucinating. And Robert's freaking out, and he's like, there's rats everywhere. And the officers see him throwing imaginary rats out the window, but for some reason, they don't arrest him. So I guess they just give him a warning and let him drive home naked. I don't know. Then that same year, police pull him over again. This time, they find all kinds of drugs and a Magnum pistol on him. And so, bam, they arrest him. And a few weeks later, while out on bail, Robert's wandering around his neighborhood and he walks home and he walks inside his house. But he's so high on drugs that he actually doesn't walk into his house. He's walked into his neighbor's home 17 houses down the street. And his neighbors are there chilling, a mom, a dad, and a couple of kids. But they don't see him at first as she wanders inside and makes his way up their spiral staircase. And there, Robert finds a bedroom. And he takes off his pants and strips down to his boxers and t-shirt. And he gets into bed and he passes out and starts snoring. Then the mom walks by and she sees someone sleeping in her child's bed, which she assumes is her own kid. And so she comes in and she's like, "What, sweetie? Why are you in bed so early?" And she pulls back the covers and sees that it's a strange, grown-ass man sleeping in her kid's bed. And then of course she freaks out and calls the police. And so bam, he's arrested again. Here's a picture of him in court, and he's a known movie star at this point. So this news story blows the up, and it makes Robert into a punchline. All the late night shows are making fun of him. I mean, people can't believe he went from Oscar nominee to a train wreck so quickly, and the acting career that he had been working so hard to build suddenly starts falling apart. And for the next few years, he keeps struggling. And at one point, his good friend, actor Sean Penn, is so worried about his friend Robert that he shows up to Robert's house. And bam, he kicks the front door down and he's like, "That's it, you're going to rehab." And he puts Robert on a private plane to a rehab center where he has to stay sober for a while. However, a few days later, Robert escapes through a window and he hitchhikes to the airport, where he calls his agent to buy him a plane ticket to fly back. And once he's on the plane, he immediately starts drinking on the flight. And he goes to court, and he basically tells the judge that he knows he's risking his life, but he can't seem to stop himself. And he gets sentenced to 3 years in prison. A year later, he gets out. So he gets out a little early, but now he's struggling he can't get an acting gig because Hollywood movies need insurance. And the insurance companies won't cover him because he's too big of a risk. They think he'll stop showing up to work and it'll affect the production and cost the studio millions of dollars. And so he can't get work and he's not making any money. He's in a lot of debt with legal bills. He loses his car. He loses his house. He loses everything. And that is when Robert Downey Jr. becomes nearly bankrupt and homeless, mostly crashing on friends' couches. But then in 2003, something unexpected happens. He actually gets an acting role in a movie called Gothica. But he has to give up his salary to cover the extra cost of the insurance, but he gets the role. And on that set is when he meets this woman, Susan. Susan is a producer working on the movie. And Robert sees her and he thinks she is fine. And she thinks he is fine. And they start dating and they fall in love and eventually they get married. But it's not long into their relationship before Susan has to put her foot down and tell him, "It's me or the drugs. Choose one. And Robert, he doesn't want to lose her, so he starts taking his sobriety super seriously. Like, he gets help, he gets into 12-step programs and long-term therapy, and it's really hard for him, but he does it. And now at 38 years old, for the first time since he was a kid, Robert is finally clean. This is great for him. Here's the thing though, Robert is sober now, but he was such a mess for such a long time that he still has a hard time getting people to believe in him, including movie studios, because to them, he is still unemployable. However, not everyone has written him completely off. This guy still believes in him. Actor, director, producer Jon Favreau. And in 2006, Jon just happens to be casting for a new movie he's directing called Iron Man. And when Jon sees Robert audition on camera, he's like, that's our guy. That is Tony Stark. However, the suits at the studio are like, no way, bro. They don't want to take the risk on Robert Downey Jr., the drug addict, the loose cannon. I mean, the entire future of Marvel Studios is riding on the success of this Iron Man movie. This is a $140 million production. What if he relapses? It could tank the whole MCU that they have planned. And so they tell Jon, bro, we can't risk the entire future of Marvel Studios on an addict. But Jon, he's not going to let it go. He believes in Robert completely. And so he keeps working to convince the studio heads that Robert is their guy. He is Tony Stark. Only he can play this role. And to prove that Robert is dedicated to this job, he agrees to take only a tiny paycheck for it. A fraction of what he should make. And then they agree, and so boom, he gets cast as Tony Stark in Iron Man. Truth is, I am Iron Man. And you know the rest. In 2008, the movie premieres and boom, it blows the hell up, earning $500 million at the box office. And it's the start of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which becomes the highest grossing movie franchise of all time, making the decision to cast Robert Downey Jr., one of the greatest and most lucrative casting decisions in movie history,